We all know that a mix of mom and dad's genes help to form who we are, like brown eyes from my mom and my nose from my dad. But what about hearing loss? Is that part of our genetic makeup or is it environmental? I talked nature versus nurture in hearing loss with audiologist Dr. Danny Gnewikow.
Hearing loss is affecting about 20 million Americans. Wow. It's one of the most common medical problems in the United States right now, so it's very common. Hearing loss comes from two things. It's either acquired, which means too many shotguns, or I didn't have my earplugs on my motorcycle, or the mill that I worked in didn't give me hearing protection. Acquired means it's happened to us because of something we've done, or it can be hereditary. You can have some that's associated with syndromes where the children are born with hearing loss, but most are not. I think it's like 70-30, probably 70% are non-syndromic. And basically, they tend, in my perspective, to start showing up in the third and fourth decade. I have a hearing loss myself, and mine started showing up when I was in my 50s. So there are some hereditary links, things to look for, red flags, the obvious. There's a lot of people in my family that don't hear very well. Yeah, but they all worked in the sawmill. So that's why they couldn't hear. It wasn't hereditary. Well, you can have both at the same time. They can coexist. And so just because your parents and your grandparents and your great-grandparents worked in a cotton mill or worked in a sawmill and all had hearing loss doesn't mean it might not be hereditary. But if you start seeing it, particularly in people who are not working in those environments, then of course that makes it even more likely that it could be hereditary. The bad thing about a hereditary hearing loss is you're not doing it to yourself. It's something genetic and it's going to happen regardless. And over the years, I've seen people with hearing losses like this that I've followed for several years, and what you see over time is it gradually gets worse and worse with age. And then a lot of people think, oh, I'm getting deafer because of my age, when in fact, it's not really the age. Age within itself does not cause a lot of hearing loss, but if you have a predisposition genetically, then as that exists longer and longer, you tend to have more hearing loss. So when you're seeing that pattern, there are some things that you probably need to do. Well, the first thing is obviously get a hearing test.
Right.
That way you have a baseline so that as your hearing is changing, you'll know where it started and you can know, is this a rapid decline or is this a very gradual decline? I think you should always have a medical exam, preferably with an ENT doctor, to be sure there's not some other medical etiology for this. I think you need to be particularly careful around loud noise and things that might affect your hearing. And we all know that loud noise affects the hearing, and so we all want to wear our earplugs, and that's great. But you may have a predisposition to a weakened ear, and that same amount of noise might do more damage to you than your next door neighbor who has no hereditary link. And of course the other issue is if you're going to lose it anyway, why speed up the process with something that you might have had some control over? So I think you need to be particularly careful to use hearing protection. There are certain medications sometimes that also affect hearing loss, and sometimes we can't avoid them because they're sometimes related to cancer and things like that. But I think it's always important that you let medical staff be aware of the fact that you have a hearing loss, so that if they're going to use an unusually powerful antibiotic or a chemotherapy and there happens to be one that is less likely to damage the nerve endings in the inner ear, that might be a better choice. Of course, when it comes to life and death, you have to do what you have to do. Right. So I think those things are all important. I started losing hearing when I was in my 50s, and mine is a coexisting hearing loss as well, because everyone on my mother's side of the family started losing hearing, all of my aunts and uncles on her side, but I used to hunt a lot. And so I have some hearing loss related to noise exposure in the days when I was indestructible and didn't think I needed earplugs, which now I know I do, coupled with that, a predisposition. And so I have about a 50% loss of hearing. And actually, I wear hearing aids for that, as you can see. And so the solution is the last thing we should talk about. There are two types of hereditary hearing losses. One relates to the mechanical aspects of the ear, the middle ear. And there is a condition called otosclerosis where the little middle ear bones fuse, and many times surgery will rectify that, not always. So that is one aspect of hereditary hearing loss that sometimes can be treated medically. But the majority of hearing losses are nerve damage, and the nerve damage cannot be corrected medically. So basically in the situations like that, you end up using hearing aids or assistive listening devices of some sort. So if you have a history of hearing loss in your family, the wise thing to do would be go ahead and get a baseline. You may come out and be happy as a lark and say, I didn't have any hearing loss. On the other hand, the audiologist might begin to see some indications that the hearing is going down. You might be having a little ringing or buzzing in your ears, which sometimes is a little red flag to get checked out. But the main thing is, if you've got a good, solid hearing test, then you know what your starting point was and you know how rapidly it's changing.
And Audiology Hearing Aid Associates has 2 area locations, one in Lynchburg, 434-528-4245. They also have a Danville location, their number 434-799-6288. Also online, digitalhearing4u.com.